The rescue of the Oasis of Moonlight and the Secrets of Inverness. In the previous episode, upon returning from the sacred interior of Thule, Alexander and his group discovered Sostrato keeping solitary vigil before a fire burning with an intensity impossible for something that should have died out days ago, and who believed with absolute certainty that only a single night had passed. The temporal fracture Thule had created revealed itself in its full magnitude when the crew of the Alethea recounted 3 days of terror. A beast from the deep testing courage and character with calculated strikes that never pierced, only judged. And Sostrato revealed that he had not kept his vigil alone. A man had emerged from the mist, carrying impossible provisions, conversing for hours about ancestral battles, mentioning a grandson who had just reached the continent and displayed an inherited bravery. A man who bore an extraordinary resemblance to Alexander, who never revealed his name, who was, they understood afterward, the ancestor himself, the eternal guardian capable of traversing ages, existing at multiple points in time simultaneously. Nevim had then disclosed the details of the Fountain of Memories awaiting activation in Amesbury, a dimensional portal where Alexander would use the sacred vibration he had learned to summon Excalibur across the centuries. The next phase was opening, and what opens cannot be closed. In this new episode, we shall discover together how the return to Amesbury will bring not the rest they have earned, but an urgency that admits no hesitation. The Oasis of Moonlight has vanished. Makeda's African vessel has not returned from a routine fishing excursion in a week, and what they will find when they locate it in the frozen waters of Inverness will reveal that the Beast of the Deep was not merely the Alethea's crew's trial. It was the same trial, repeated, inflicted upon those who dared navigate those waters without the protection that only certain purposes confer. During the repairs of the damaged vessel, aided by the unexpected help of the Jacobites, an unforeseen connection will emerge between the group and Jacobus Stewart, a monarch who holds the name of Nevim in tender memory, recalling the druid who, decades past, healed the boy who would become king, and who now transforms hospitality into a sacred debt of gratitude. In prophetic dream, the ancestor will visit Alexander with instructions that are at once simple and revolutionary. The beast need not be defeated, it must be understood. And between the capture and liberation of its offspring, a tacit accord will be sealed, not in words, but in the only language that consciousnesses of different species are able to share: action with unambiguous intent. The return and the unsettling discovery. The horizon over Amesbury bled in shades of amber and crimson when the Alethea broke the line between sea and sky, and the first thing Alexander saw on the shore was not the harbor, but Edith's face, and that face carried news that no greeting could delay. The ship returned from Thule with a crew transformed in ways that ordinary words could never fully capture. Alexander remained on the foredeck, eyes fixed on the approaching coast, yet his mind sailing waters far deeper than those beneath the keel. Excalibur, firmly secured at his waist but still unspoken, still awaiting the ritual of the Fountain of Memories, pulsed subtly in rhythm with his heartbeat, reminding him constantly that he carried not merely a blade, but a responsibility that transcended common mortal understanding. Helena approached in silence, laying a gentle hand upon his shoulder, with that simple gesture that communicated volumes without need of the words that only impoverish the depth of certain moments. Makeda and Amina conversed in low tones beside the central mast, Makeda's Wiccan heritage blossoming with an intensity that simultaneously filled her with wonder and dread. She felt invisible currents of energy coursing through everything around her, perceived whispers of elemental forces in the wind that filled the sails, recognized ancestral patterns in the waves dancing about the hull with the familiarity of things that had always been there and that only now had someone to perceive them. When the anchor plunged into the familiar waters of Amesbury's harbor, Edith waited on the dock with an expression that mingled relief at seeing them return alive and a worry that weighed visibly upon her shoulders. Alexander recognized that look. He had seen it before on the faces of messengers bearing news that no one wishes to speak aloud, news that already exists before it is told and that merely awaits the voice that will give it inevitable form. Before the gangplank had even touched the wooden pier, he already knew. The rest they had earned after Thule's trials would have to wait. Edith dispensed with all formal greeting, her words pouring forth in a torrent of barely contained urgency. The Oasis of Moonlight has been missing for a week. Makeda, your ship departed on a routine fishing excursion with a trusted crew and local residents who know these waters like the palms of their hands, and it never returned from the frozen horizon to the north. I have searched every nearby port, consulted fishermen and navigators, yet no one has seen any sign of the African vessel since it weighed anchor beneath a crescent moon that has now completed an entire cycle. And to you who accompanies this crossing, who ventures with us into this territory where the sea passes judgment before permitting passage, where ancient creatures guard frontiers that no map records, I offer a simple yet essential request. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comment sharing what you feel. Each gesture of yours is a flame that joins the others, strengthening the invisible current that unites hearts across time and through the mysteries that await revelation. In doing so, you do not merely support this work, you become part of this saga. The story continues, and it is your presence that keeps the fire alive. Makeda felt a shiver travel her spine with an intensity that raised the hairs on her arms beneath the cold breeze blowing off the sea. It was not common fear that moved through her. It was an ancestral warning that her newfound Wiccan sensitivity translated into a bodily language impossible to ignore. Something in the uncharted depths of the north lurked with an intent that transcended mere animal predation. Something ancient and powerful was testing those who dared navigate territories reserved for initiates in mysteries that most preferred to leave comfortably unexamined. Makeda's eyes met Alexander's, and a silent communication flowed between them with the quality of an electric current charged with multiple meanings. A sense their time in Thule had developed in them like an additional faculty that no school had ever taught. He understood what she felt, because he felt it too. Because Thule had opened within him perceptive channels that now resonated with the same frequencies she received. There was no need to discuss whether they would go in search of the Oasis of Moonlight. The question did not even present itself as a choice, but as an inevitable destiny already written before any of them had been born to play their roles in this tapestry. Alexander stepped forward, positioning himself before Makeda with a bearing that combined a warrior's resolve and a brother's compassion. His right hand resting lightly upon the hilt of Excalibur in a gesture that had already grown as natural as breathing, as laden with meaning as any vow pronounced before witnesses. I will bring back the Oasis of Moonlight and all who sail upon her. He spoke each word as a sacred oath that sealed fate and summoned invisible forces as witnesses to a promise that would not be broken even under threat of death or worse. Makeda nodded, tears shining in eyes that reflected both gratitude and the recognition that Alexander did not speak as a friend rendering a favor, but as a warrior honoring a sacred code of brotherhood forged in trials that leave permanent marks on the structure of who one is. Helena declared immediately that she would sail with them, not as an announcement awaiting approval, but as an affirmation of the nature of things, as if to say that the sun would rise in the east. Amina, Hale, and Sostrato completed the circle with postures that required no words. And before the sun finished its descent below the horizon, the Alethea would weigh anchor once more, sailing northward beneath a sky already beginning to fill with omens in the shapes of clouds that only initiates knew how to read correctly, each formation a symbol in a language older than any recorded human civilization. The journey, along the Brittany coast. There are silences that rest and silences that work. The one that had settled over the crew of the Alethea along the Brittany coast was of the second kind, a silence that scoured horizons, that processed recent memories in layers, that prepared for what had no name yet, but that everyone felt approaching with the inevitability of things chosen by destiny before any conscious choice could ratify or refuse them. The wind blew steady, but not violent, whispering through the rigging and the sails like ancestral voices sharing secrets in languages forgotten by civilizations that had vanished, leaving behind only enigmatic ruins and fragmented legends. Helena remained beside Alexander at the prow. Both joined in a silent vigil that had grown nearly meditative, their consciousnesses expanding beyond the limits of the body in an effort to capture any vibration that might indicate the whereabouts of their missing companions. The waves struck rhythmically against the hull of the Alethea, producing a hypnotic cadence that seemed to carry encoded messages for those with ears trained to listen to the non-verbal languages the ocean employs when it wishes to communicate truths that its depths keep in safekeeping. Makeda had positioned herself beside the central mast, hands pressed firmly against the ancient wood that vibrated subtly with a life of its own, as though the vessel were a conscious organism actively participating in the search rather than a mere vessel. She had closed her eyes, allowing her newfound Wiccan sensitivity to flow through her without resistance, opening perceptive channels to energetic currents that ran not only through the physical sea, but through subtle dimensions interwoven with material reality in ways that modern science still hesitated to acknowledge. Fragmented images flashed through her consciousness, glimpses of an African boat anchored against a rocky shore, figures moving in a state of controlled agitation, a feeling of fear mingled with the determination to survive. She could not say with certainty whether these were authentic visions or projections of desperate hope, but something within her whispered that the crew of the Oasis of Moonlight remained alive, awaiting a rescue that would come if only they could hold on a little longer. Amina prepared medical supplies in anticipation of possible injuries, her hands moving with a precision born of years of training, but now guided also by intuitions rising from the inner wisdom awakened in Thule. She organized medicinal herbs, bandages, simple surgical instruments, but also included specific crystals known for their healing properties in ancient traditions. Sachets containing combinations of plants chosen not only for their chemical effects, but for the energetic resonances she now perceived with a clarity she would have been unable to name just weeks before. Hale observed her work with quiet respect, recognizing the transformation that had occurred not only in Amina, but in all of them, accepting that the world revealed itself to be far vaster and more mysterious than any individual system of belief could entirely encompass. Sostrato coordinated the sailors in continuous adjustments of the sails to maximize speed without sacrificing stability, for the northern waters were known for unpredictable temperaments that could shift from calm to furious in a matter of moments, especially when invisible forces decided to manifest their displeasure at intruders navigating territories that preferred to remain untouched. Alexander felt the weight of Excalibur at his waist as a constant reminder of responsibilities that transcended the immediate mission of rescue, but also as a source of strength that nourished his resolve when doubts began to whisper the possibility of failure in the less illuminated corners of a weary mind. He recognized a pattern emerging through recent experience. Each challenge presented was not a random obstacle, but a carefully calibrated trial, forging specific qualities needed for a greater journey not yet fully revealed. Thule had taught lessons about the nature of time and choice, about how past and future intertwined in an eternal present where free will and destiny danced in a paradox that only direct experience could resolve. And now, the Northern Sea presented a new set of trials, testing not merely physical courage, but loyalty, compassion, and the capacity to honor commitments even when the personal cost proved potentially devastating. It was Sostrato who first spotted what all of them had been seeking with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "Mast to starboard!" His voice thundering across the deck with a mixture of relief and caution, for the seasoned navigator knew that finding did not necessarily mean resolving, that discoveries frequently brought new complexities rather than reassuring simplicity. Everyone rushed to the indicated side, eyes following the direction pointed by the experienced navigator's outstretched arm. There, near the shores of the territory the maps identified as Inverness, rose the familiar structure of the Oasis of Moonlight, swaying gently in relatively calm waters that contrasted dramatically with the violence that subsequent accounts would reveal had occurred a week before. Alexander felt the tight knot in his chest loosen slightly, replaced by a silent gratitude directed at invisible forces that had guided the search to a positive conclusion, but also by a mental readiness to confront whatever had kept the African vessel anchored there instead of returning to Amesbury as planned. There was visible damage to the hull even from a distance, and something in the surrounding waters carried a quality of silence that was not tranquility. It was the silence that settles after something immense has passed through and decided, for reasons of its own, not to return. Not yet. The reunion and the account of terror. Kofi's embrace was not the embrace of a man rescued from a danger that had passed. It was the embrace of someone who was still inside the danger, one that had merely changed form from exterior to interior. When the vessels docked alongside the Oasis of Moonlight and Alexander and his companions came aboard, what they found was not a crew relieved by a rescue that had finally arrived. It was a crew that had survived something which had not yet finished its work upon them. Men who had emerged physically unscathed from 3 days with the beast, but whose eyes carried a new depth, raw and utterly irreplaceable. The depth of those who have looked upon something that exceeds every rational framework available, and who, unable to deny the experience, have been compelled to expand the framework. Kofi seized Alexander's hands with a force that almost hurt, his eyes conveying a gratitude more eloquent than any articulated speech could have constructed. Makeda moved among her crew like a mother assessing the condition of her children after a devastating storm, touching faces, examining minor wounds, murmuring words of comfort in an African dialect that carried ancestral music in every syllable. Helena and Amina began immediately a systematic medical assessment, searching for signs of malnutrition, dehydration, psychological trauma that frequently manifested in physical symptoms that untrained eyes might overlook, but that experienced healers recognized through subtle patterns in bodily posture and the quality of breath. It was only when the initial emotions of the reunion began to settle that Kofi managed to articulate the full account. His voice still trembled slightly as he narrated events that experienced sailors would normally recount with exaggerated bravado, but which no one there had the stomach to embellish, for the raw truth was sufficiently terrifying without need of dramatic ornament. "We were fishing peacefully," he began, his eyes fixing upon a distant point on the horizon, as though he were reliving the scene with the cruel clarity of memories that terror engraves in immutable detail. The sky was clear, the winds favorable, the nets heavy with abundant catches. Then the waters beneath us began to stir in a way that was not natural, not a storm or a common sea current, but something alive, something immense displacing a volume of water that created visible undulations on the surface even before the creature had fully emerged. Alexander and his companions listened in attentive silence, recognizing disturbing parallels with their own experiences in Thule. The sea beast that had tested courage and character during the vigil on the island and the beast that had struck the Oasis of Moonlight, they were the same language, different words, the same tongue. The beast that emerged from the depths, Kofi continued, his voice taking on the texture of a nightmare relived, was something that legends describe, but that the rational mind refuses to accept until the moment the eyes witness a reality impossible to deny. Its size defied the natural laws governing all known marine creatures, its body coiling with muscles that undulated beneath scales reflecting sunlight in hypnotic patterns that nearly paralyzed the will to resist. And the eyes. He paused, with the specific weight of pauses that occur when every available word proves inadequate. They were not the eyes of an unthinking fish. They were eyes that thought, that observed, that judged. It was like being observed by an ancient and powerful consciousness that saw through all our masks and pretensions down to the true core of who we were. Helena exchanged a look with Nevim upon hearing this, both recognizing a familiar pattern emerging with the retroactive clarity of comprehensions that arrive only after sufficient experience has accumulated to reveal the entire design. The forces that governed those waters permitted no one to navigate them without first having their character measured. Different trials for different people, but all serving the same fundamental purpose. A single blow of its tail against the hull of the Oasis of Moonlight opened a fissure that began to admit water at an alarming rate. Kofi described how they had rowed desperately toward the coast visible in the distance, half the crew working on improvised patches, while the other half kept the vessel in a movement that might well be the difference between life and death. The beast followed us for some time, he recounted, keeping its distance, but making clear through its sinuous movements that it remained watchful, that our escape was tolerated, not won. When we finally reached the shallower waters near Inverness and cast anchor where a creature of such size could not follow without running aground, it held position in the deeper water, observing for hours before at last disappearing back into the abyss. The subsequent week spent anchored at Inverness had been a trial of patience and humility for sailors accustomed to the freedom of open seas, trapped between the fear of waters guarded by an implacable creature and the shame of having failed at a simple errand that generations of fishermen before them had completed routinely without incident worthy of mention. Alexander had listened to the entire narrative in contemplative silence, his mind processing the information on multiple levels simultaneously. He had recognized a pattern consistent with the lessons Thule had taught about the nature of cosmic trials. With a voice carrying the authority born of newly acquired wisdom, he declared, "We will raise the Oasis of Moonlight and restore it to the glory it deserves. No vessel that serves an honorable purpose shall remain wounded when we have hands capable of healing wood just as healers cure flesh." The improvised shipyard and the Jacobite legends. The work of repairing a wounded vessel carries a ritual quality that goes beyond naval carpentry. It is the act of refusing to accept that damage is permanent, of insisting with hammers and nails and sweat that what was broken can be restored. Sostratos' summons to immediate action unleashed a mobilization that transformed the coast of Inverness into an improvised shipyard vibrating with the energy of shared purpose. Alexander organized the work with a precision that revealed the general behind the captain, assigning tasks based on individual skills, but also on the developmental needs that each person required for continued growth. The most experienced carpenters among the sailors were tasked with assessing the full extent of the damage to the hull of the Oasis of Moonlight, cataloging every fissure, every compromised plank, every weakened joint. Helena coordinated the logistics of supplies with the specific efficiency of people who transform chaos into order without needing to announce that they are doing so. The sound of saws cutting wood, hammers driving nails, voices coordinating synchronized movements created an industrial symphony that echoed through the coastal valley, drawing the curiosity of local residents who came to observe the work with a fascination born of the rarity of seeing such operations conducted with an efficiency that revealed accumulated experience. Before the first hammer struck, Alexander recognized the wisdom of seeking the permission and assistance of the Jacobites, for navigating the politics of foreign territories required as much diplomatic delicacy as executing naval repairs required technical skill. The Jacobites, after brief consultation in the local dialect, agreed not only to permit the work, but to offer active assistance that exceeded any reasonable expectation. They spoke of timber available in nearby sacred groves, ancestral trees that had grown for centuries absorbing telluric and cosmic energies that conferred special qualities beyond mere physical resilience. Wood offered not out of obligation, but out of a recognition of shared purpose. All who navigated the northern waters were united against forces that transcended common mortal understanding and that threatened visitor and resident alike with equal indifference, regardless of origin or intention. During the subsequent days of arduous labor beneath a sky frequently shrouded by clouds forming symbols in a language older than human civilization, the Jacobites began to share stories and legends accumulated across centuries. Passed down from grandparents to grandchildren on winter nights when winds howled outside cabins warmed by crackling hearths, these tales shaped an understanding of the world as a place far vaster and more mysterious than cartographic maps suggested. They spoke of sea beasts that served as guardians of forbidden territories, creatures that were not mere animals acting on predatory instinct, but executors of cosmic will, ensuring that only the worthy proceeded beyond geographical and spiritual thresholds, marking invisible boundaries between worlds. They recounted islands that appeared and vanished according to lunar calendars or stellar alignments, lands that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, visible only when specific conditions aligned to permit a temporary intersection between realities normally separated by veils infinitely resistant to unauthorized penetration. The common crew of the Oasis of Moonlight and the less experienced sailors of the Alethea listened to these tales with a growing dread that painted their faces in pale tones, some beginning to seriously consider abandoning the life of a navigator in favor of a safer existence on dry land where the greatest dangers came from terrestrial animals that at least obeyed comprehensible natural laws. But Alexander, Helena, Makeda, Amina, Hale, and Sostrato, those who had drunk from the sacred waters of Thule and emerged reborn with expanded perceptions and courage, tempered in the furnaces of trials that had tested the most intimate fiber of their beings, remained serene before narratives that others would have found terrifying. They exchanged knowing glances when the Jacobites described phenomena the group recognized firsthand, subtle smiles illuminating their faces when specific details resonated with their own experiences. Such serenity was born not of arrogance, but of the deep understanding that Thule had taught. Certain knowledge can only be transmitted through lived, direct experience. Words are not merely inadequate, but potentially dangerous, creating distorted expectations or drawing unwanted attention from forces that prefer to remain undisturbed until the cosmically appropriate moment for revelation. The wisdom of the elders and the veils between worlds. There are questions that elders answer directly, and there are questions they answer by saying something else entirely, letting the true answer arrive from the margin, from an angle that the direct question could never have reached. Through fragmented conversations with the Jacobite elders during pauses in the repair work, a broader pattern began to emerge with a clarity that transformed fear into understanding, terror into reverential respect for forces that governed those seas with impartial justice based on criteria transcending conventional human morality. The eldest spoke with the voice of those who have witnessed generations being born and dying, while certain truths remained constant across centuries. The farther north one sailed, the thinner the veil between worlds grew. The more potent became the forces that tested and transformed those who dared cross frontiers, marking territories reserved for initiates. These were not arbitrary punishments, but careful calibrations. Each encounter with sea beasts or impossible storms or currents that defied known physical laws served as a trial separating spiritual tourists from authentic seekers, adventurers driven by greed from pilgrims, guided by an inner calling that resonated with specific cosmic frequencies. An unspoken yet clearly understood warning wove itself through each shared legend like a scarlet thread running through a broader tapestry. Those who had not been chosen, who navigated the north driven by greed or hollow curiosity rather than by a sacred purpose aligned with cosmic will, would be tormented by increasingly intense manifestations until they turned back. The beasts of the waters were not mere animals defending territory, but executors of a justice ensuring that only those of adequate spiritual temper proceeded beyond the thresholds where reality became malleable. The Oasis of Moonlight had been struck not as punishment, but as a trial of character, measuring not physical strength, but spiritual resilience, the capacity to maintain cohesion and hope even when circumstances conspired to induce paralyzing despair. The fact that Kofi's crew had survived and sought refuge rather than succumbing to suicidal panic, that they had maintained the crew's cohesion rather than fragmenting into accusations and internal conflict, indicated that they had passed the test even without fully understanding the nature of the trial they had faced. Alexander recognized the familiar pattern, just as he himself had not fully grasped the significance of the encounter with the ancestor until days afterward. The sailors of the Oasis of Moonlight would likely carry the marks of that experience whose wisdom, implanted at subconscious depths during moments of extreme terror, when normal psychological defenses dissolve, allowing cosmic truths to penetrate levels of being that conscious rationality habitually blocks, would only reveal themselves fully years or decades later. When the repairs were at last completed after efforts that tested everyone's physical endurance but also strengthened bonds of fellowship through shared labor, the Oasis of Moonlight was returned to the water in an improvised ceremony carrying the solemnity of a sacred rite, even without explicit religious formalities. The vessel slid into the sea's embrace with a grace that seemed to affirm a restored dignity. New wood integrating with the old in a union that created a composite strength exceeding the sum of its individual parts. The battle scars were not entirely erased, but transformed into symbols of resilience and wisdom acquired through trial. Alexander watched the launch with a satisfaction that warmed his chest in ways that military victories never could, for this represented something more fundamental. The fulfillment of a promise made to a companion in the journey, a demonstration that brotherhood forged in shared trials was not mere temporary convenience, but an enduring bond that withstood the tests of time and distance. The Imperial Banquet and Nevim's Revelation. The name arrived like a stone cast into a calm lake, and what the ripples touched ran far deeper than the surface of the conversation. The banquet hall of the Jacobite palace proved to be an impressive structure that combined medieval functionality with artistic touches, elevating the space into the realm of contemplative beauty. Ancient oak beams supported a high ceiling decorated with tapestries depicting scenes of historical battles, legendary hunts, and harvest celebrations blessed by gods whose names many had long forgotten, but whose images remained woven into fabrics preserved across generations with a care that revealed reverence for cultural heritage. The monumental hearths warmed the hall against the cold that seeped through the stone walls, dancing flames casting shadows that animated the figures in the tapestries as though warriors and gods moved in a parallel dimension, accessible only through portals of altered perception that the wavering light offered to observers with active imaginations. Jacobus Stuart rose from his ornate throne as Alexander and his companions approached with measured steps that communicated respect without subservience, confidence without arrogance. The monarch was a middle-aged man whose bearing radiated authority born not merely of inherited position, but of character forged across decades of governing lands that demanded both strength and wisdom. His eyes were sharp as polished blades, examining the visitors with an intensity that penetrated beyond surface appearances, seeking the measure of characters that would determine how the relationship between Inverness and these foreigners would develop. The smile that curved his lips when he completed his initial assessment carried genuine warmth tempered by the caution appropriate to a leader responsible for the well-being of an entire people. The banquet that followed proved abundant in ways that exceeded nutritional need, entering the territory of a hospitality demonstration that traditional cultures employed as diplomatic language, communicating intentions through food and drink as much as through words pronounced in formal speeches. And it was amid the celebration, punctuated by genuine laughter and singing that arose spontaneously whenever collective joy reached a critical mass, that Jacobites began to ask questions revealing a well-informed curiosity about the visitors' origins. Alexander chose his words carefully in a verbal dance that honored truth without disclosing secrets better left guarded, affirming that they were navigators with a passion for the sea that called restless souls with promises of discoveries awaiting beyond familiar horizons. Jacobites nodded with an expression suggesting he accepted the answer without necessarily believing it captured the whole of the story, but also displaying the wisdom of a man who knew not to press for details that guests clearly preferred to keep private. It was then that Jacobites mentioned casually, as though a memory surfaced spontaneously, stirred by a reference to Amesbury made earlier in the conversation, that he had visited that city as a young man. "My father dreamed of a white-bearded man of great wisdom," he recounted, his voice softening as he recalled memories of a paternal figure long deceased yet still present in the lessons that had shaped the character of the son destined to rule. He resolved that we should travel to Amesbury in search of this sage, whom his nightly visions insisted could heal the chronic pain afflicting my young body, resistant to every treatment the local physicians had attempted without success. We found a druid whose hands carried knowledge that transcended conventional medical technique, who saw through the physical symptoms down to spiritual causes rooted in energetic misalignments that only healers initiated in ancient mysteries could perceive and correct. A pause, carrying the weight of memories that time had not diminished, only deepened. I never forgot the name of that wise man of Amesbury, Neville. He did not merely heal the pain that tormented my existence and transformed each day into a trial of endurance. He taught lessons about the nature of suffering and purpose, about how adversity forges character when met with dignity rather than corrosive bitterness. Upon hearing the familiar name spoken with such reverence, Alexander felt a current of recognition travel his spine with the specific clarity of synchronicities that appear as coincidence only to observers who have yet to develop the vocabulary to name what they perceive. "Neville lives," Alexander affirmed in a steady voice, carrying the joy of sharing news he knew would bring pleasure to his host. "He is a close friend to all of us gathered here. He continues to practice the healing arts in Amesbury, serving the community with a dedication that has only intensified with the passage of years, which brings additional wisdom that accumulated experience deposits in receptive souls." The revelation instantly transformed the atmosphere in the hall, from formal cordiality to the warmth of a meeting between members of an expanded spiritual family, recognizing bonds that transcend blood or nationality. Jacobus rose abruptly from his throne, approaching Alexander and seizing both his hands in a gesture communicating emotion too profound for words to adequately articulate. "If he is a friend of Navum, he shall be a friend of mine," he declared, his voice thickened by feelings that decades had not diluted. "I implore you to remain and spend the night under my roof. I shall provide everything you require, for to honor the friends of Nevum is to honor the very man who restored my life to me when hope had already been abandoned by all except a persistent father who refused to accept a destiny of perpetual suffering for a beloved son." sacred hospitality, and the oniric visit. There are dreams the body produces out of exhaustion, and there are visitations that arrive while the body rests, using the silence of consciousness as a portal for transmissions that the noise of waking would not permit to be received. Jacobites' hospitality exceeded any expectation of comfort that sailors accustomed to hammocks on open decks could have anticipated. The rooms were spacious, warmed by hearths, tended by servants who appeared silently to add wood whenever the flames began to diminish. The beds were monuments of softness that embraced weary bodies like materialized clouds, offering a rest that transcended mere sleep and entered the territory of rejuvenation that only environments charged with genuine intentions of hospitality could facilitate. Alexander was escorted to the principal chamber. He removed Excalibur from his waist with reverential care, positioning the sword on a stand near the bed where it would remain within reach, an instrument of war and a symbol of spiritual authority, its command over forces transcending merely physical violence. When his head finally touched the pillow, the exhausted body claimed its rest without requesting permission from the conscious mind. But what came was not exactly sleep. It was an altered state of consciousness that was neither wakefulness nor dream, but something between the two extremes, a portal to the dimensions that Thule had taught him to access, a channel that profound exhaustion paradoxically rendered more open than conventional states of alert awareness. The presence materialized in the oniric space with the same serene dignity that had characterized the first encounter in the cave outside of time. The ancestor, eyes containing depths that suggested witness to eras incomprehensible to human minds bounded by lifespans measured in decades, appeared not as a distant and imposing figure, but with that proximity, Alexander had learned to recognize as the specific quality of communications that occur not through air, but directly within the interior chambers of consciousness where thoughts take form before words articulate them. Alexander, the voice resonated through those interior spaces. You and your companions must help Jacobus resolve the problem of the beasts that torment this sea. It is no coincidence that you are guided here at this precise moment, when solutions become possible through the convergence of factors that, in isolation, would remain insufficient, but that together create an opportunity for transformation benefiting all involved. The ancestor continued with an instruction carrying surprising technical specificity. Set a trap with an abundance of fish in the shallow waters near the shore. The beast's offspring will be drawn by the concentration of food, youthful impatience responding to a bounty that instinct interprets as a gift from the ocean rather than a deliberate stratagem. Capture the offspring with a care that avoids injury, for the objective is not cruelty, but communication with the mother through the only language she understands with precision. A demonstration that you hold power over her progeny combined with the intention of returning it unharmed. A pause carrying the weight of an instruction arriving at its most crucial point. With the capture and subsequent liberation of the offspring, after a tacit negotiation established through actions rather than words, which beasts do not comprehend linguistically, yet understand perfectly at levels that transcend language, the mother will no longer torment the vessels in this region. She will recognize that the humans navigating these waters are not threats to be eliminated, but coexistence to be tolerated within mutually acceptable parameters. Alexander absorbed the instructions with a mind that had learned through sufficient trials not to question the wisdom the ancestor transmitted, trusting that the directions offered carried considerations his limited understanding could not yet fully perceive, but which experience would validate as events unfolded. The awakening and the preparations. Alexander awoke with the first light of dawn penetrating the window of his chamber, his mind immediately clear and focused, as though the dream had been not merely a message, but a preparation. The spirit waking before the body, orienting the coming day before the day had begun. He dressed quickly, securing Excalibur at his waist, and stepped out into the palace corridors where he found Helena already awake and ready, as though some connection that Thule had established between them operated even during sleep, rousing her at the precise moment she needed to be present. "I had a visitation," Alexander began without preamble. He relayed the instructions he had received in precise detail, watching as her eyes lit with recognition of a familiar pattern. The cosmos once again supplying exact directions when the appropriate timing aligned with the present capacities of the people designated to fulfill specific tasks in the greater tapestry. They summoned their companions to an urgent gathering while Jacobite servants prepared the morning meal. Makeda, Amina, Hale, and Sostrato assembled around the table as Alexander shared the vision, each listening with an attentiveness that neither judged nor questioned, but simply absorbed the information as preparation for action they were already beginning to visualize in terms of logistics and coordination. Sostrato, a veteran whose experience at sea spanned decades of navigating waters that had tested generations before him, nodded thoughtfully as he pictured the execution of the trap Alexander had described. "We will need a net strong enough to contain the offspring, but flexible enough to prevent injury when the creature struggles against a confinement that instinct will interpret as a mortal threat, even when our intentions are relatively benign." When Jacobus joined the group, Alexander explained the plan with a candor that honored the trust the monarch had placed in them. He did not attribute the instruction explicitly to the timeless ancestor, whose existence remained a secret kept among those who had drunk from the waters of Thule, but presented the information as intuitive insights that experienced navigators sometimes receive through dreams that the cosmos employs as a means of communication when messages must be transmitted to specific individuals. Jacobus listened with an expression that moved from initial skepticism through growing surprise to reverential acceptance. These visitors were not common fishermen, and the insights they brought exceeded any knowledge that ordinary naval experience could have conferred. "If you possess the wisdom to resolve a problem that has tormented these waters across generations," Jacobus declared with a mixture of hope and hard-learned caution, "then I shall provide every resource you require." The mobilization that followed was that particular kind, specific to actions that find authority willing to support them, the efficiency that only monarchical command could marshal, servants running in multiple directions to summon fishermen, gather equipment, and prepare supplies. The selection of the site for the trap required consultation with the eldest local fishermen, whose knowledge encompassed decades of accumulated observation. They identified a specific cove where the depth diminished gradually, an area the offspring could access comfortably, but where a mother of considerably greater size would be forced to remain at a distance, unable to follow without risk of running aground on the shallow bed. Makeda prepared specific herbs known in Wiccan tradition for their properties of animal calming, substances that, when dissolved in water, created subtle alterations influencing the behavior of marine creatures in ways that modern science had not yet fully cataloged, but which practitioners of ancient arts knew through experimentation passed down orally through lineages of healers connected to elemental wisdoms. The trap and the capture of the offspring. There are moments when planning ceases to be possible, and all that remains is to be completely present in the instant that arrives. The vessels departed from Inverness beneath a sky that had dawned clear but carried on its horizons clouds promising weather changes that could complicate the operation, the cosmos introducing variables that even the most careful plans could not fully anticipate, as though insisting that no trial be executed without uncertainty remaining as a constitutive element. Alexander commanded the lead boat, Helena at his side as second in command, whose competence required no constant supervision, freeing his attention to monitor the broader panorama. Sostrato captained a second vessel, positioned strategically to block alternative escape routes the offspring might attempt, while Makeda and Amina accompanied them in a third, smaller craft, ready to provide medical or magical assistance as situations developed in ways that initial plans could not entirely foresee. The work of positioning the nets began with a care that bordered on ritual reverence. Each knot inspected, each anchor set with a security that would withstand violent pulling without giving way entirely. Helena distributed the bait following a pattern that created an olfactory trail leading gradually from open water toward the center of the trap, where a maximum concentration would await like a final reward that youthful hunger would render irresistible. Makeda dissolved the prepared herbs into the surrounding water, murmuring incantations in an ancient tongue in which the syllables carried power not through semantic meaning, but through sonic vibrations resonating with specific frequencies that influenced animal consciousnesses in ways that human rationality still struggled to comprehend. The wait that followed tested everyone's patience. Seconds stretching into minutes, minutes into hours, the sun tracing its celestial arc with a slowness that seemed almost intentional, as though the cosmos were deliberately prolonging the tension to temper characters through a discipline that only forced waiting teaches to souls accustomed to immediate action. Alexander remained motionless as a statue carved from sea rock, his eyes scanning the water's surfaces for signs. Helena repeatedly checked the equipment even when previous checks had already confirmed that everything was functioning, needing physical activity to channel the restlessness that forced inactivity amplified. It was Hale who first spotted the disturbance in the waters caused not by wind or current, but by the deliberate movement of a creature displacing volume as it approached the bait. "There!" pointing with an outstretched arm in the direction where undulations formed a distinct pattern. Alexander felt adrenaline flood his veins as his muscles tensed in preparation for the action the coming moments would demand. The offspring emerged gradually from the depths, following the olfactory trail that Helena had laid with a precision now validated through young predatory behavior, consuming the bait progressively as it advanced toward the center of the trap, where the maximum concentration awaited like a reward that youthful hunger interpreted as extraordinary fortune. The creature was magnificent in its still incompletely developed youth, scales shimmering in sunlight across a spectrum of colors transitioning from deep greens to electric blues depending on the angle. Its eyes were oversized in proportion to its head, a quality that evoked protective responses even in observers who understood rationally that they were facing a predator. Alexander felt a pang of reluctance cut through his resolve as he contemplated the creature that would be captured, not out of malice, but out of the necessity of communicating with the mother in a language she would understand far better than any diplomatic gesture humans might attempt. When the offspring finally entered the perimeter of the trap, drawn by an irresistible concentration, Alexander gave the signal. The nets closed in a coordinated movement that years of maritime experience had rendered second nature. The offspring thrashed violently, serpentine movements creating waves that rocked the boats dangerously, its tail striking against the nets with a force that tested the integrity of the fibers. Makeda began to sing in low tones that vibrated with frequencies Helena felt more through her bones than through her ears, melodies that followed no Western musical scale, yet carried evident power through the effects they produced. The frantic thrashing gradually yielded to less violent movements that still communicated the desire to escape, but with a growing acceptance that immediate efforts were proving futile. The young instinct beginning to compute that there were other ways of managing that constriction beyond the violence that was yielding nothing. The silent negotiation and the tacit accord. The mother arrived before anyone saw her arrive. She arrived in the undulations that preceded her physical presence, announcing herself not with sound, but with the shape the water took as it parted before her. With the offspring securely contained but clearly distressed, Alexander turned his attention to the deeper waters where instinct told him the mother would not remain indifferent. He did not have to wait long. The waters began to stir in patterns that the small undulations caused by the offspring could never have produced. Immense volumes being displaced by a mass approaching with a speed that belied its size, suggesting an urgency driven by emotions that even aquatic creatures experienced when their young faced dangers that maternal instinct interpreted as existential threats demanding immediate intervention. The head emerged first, larger than any of the vessels present, its eyes fixing upon the contained offspring with an expression Alexander recognized even across the divide of species, universal parental anguish transcending biological boundaries. The moment was delicate, balanced on the razor's edge between success and catastrophe, contingent upon the next actions, which needed to communicate intentions that words could not articulate to an audience whose linguistic comprehension was limited to body language and physical demonstration. Alexander rose slowly in the boat that the undulations rocked dangerously. He held his gaze fixed upon the immense eyes of the mother beast, refusing to betray the fear that would be interpreted as weakness and invite attack. Helena positioned herself at his side in a demonstration of solidarity that doubled the message. They stood united in purposes that harbored no intention of harming the offspring, but that required the mother's attention for negotiations that actions would demonstrate rather than words describe. Makeda intensified her singing, whose frequencies the water transmitted with efficiency, creating sound fields that enveloped both beasts in an atmosphere that the chemical components of the herbs dissolved earlier amplified through synergies which, separately, would have produced minimal effect, but which combined yielded results surpassing the sum of their individual parts. Amina held herself ready with the medical supplies, recognizing that preparation, even when unlikely to prove sufficient against the injuries a creature of that size could inflict, offered the mental occupation that anxiety required to prevent the paralysis that forced inactivity frequently induced in personalities accustomed to proactive action. The mother beast circled the boats slowly, each movement calculated to assess the threat the humans represented to the contained offspring. Alexander waited with the patience he had learned throughout the entire journey to distinguish from passivity. It was not inaction, but deferred action, a deliberate choice not to act yet, to allow the other to complete her assessment before introducing the next element of the negotiation. When the circle was completed and the mother returned to her initial position before Alexander's boat, something in her posture shifted subtly. The tensions that had held her body in readiness for potential violence relaxed fractionally, suggesting that her assessment had concluded the offspring was not in immediate danger requiring desperate measures. Alexander gestured to Sostrato, who began the process of releasing the nets. Gradually, the mesh opened, allowing the offspring to slip through the expanding gaps. The creature swam immediately toward the mother, who received it with movements that even human observers recognized as expressions of relief and reunification, the language of affection that evolution had preserved across millennia, because the survival of species depended upon bonds that transcended individual rationality. The mother examined the offspring carefully, touching with her snout the areas the humans had handled during the capture, verifying the absence of injuries that violence would have inflicted had the intentions been malicious. When satisfied that the offspring was unharmed, she turned her final gaze upon Alexander. That gaze lasted a span of time that escaped all conventional chronological measurement. It was not a threat. It was not gratitude in the human sense of the word. It was recognition. The specific recognition of consciousnesses that assess one another through actions rather than words, that establish agreements through demonstration rather than contracts, that understand that what had been done there could not be undone, and that, for that very reason, had established something permanent. Alexander held the gaze without blinking, without retreating, without betraying what he felt. which was simultaneously fear, awe, and that emotion without a precise name in any language, yet which arises when a human being understands that they stand before something that entirely surpasses them, and that, even while surpassing them, respected them sufficiently not to destroy them. Then, in a movement carrying unmistakable finality, the mother beast plunged back into the depths, taking the offspring with her, disappearing into waters that closed over their immense bodies like curtains, ending a performance that the audience had witnessed, knowing no repetition would occur. Alexander knew immediately that the tacit accord had been established. The beast had recognized the message that the capture and subsequent liberation had communicated. The humans navigating these waters held power over her progeny, and had chosen not to exercise that power destructively when alternatives existed. In return, she would cease her attacks against vessels navigating with legitimate purposes, distinguishing them from the predatory incursions that territorial defenses legitimately resisted. He turned to his companions, seeing in their faces reflections of the same understanding, the specific emotion of those who have witnessed that wisdom and compassion, when exercised with precision and genuine intention, accomplish what no force ever could. Not the defeat of the other, but the transformation of the relationship between the two. The waters around Inverness would be different now, not because the beast had been vanquished, but because an accord had been honored, and honored accords, he had discovered throughout the entire journey, were the only currency the universe accepted as payment for passages that would otherwise remain forever closed. In the next episode, the return to Amesbury draws near, and with it, the Fountain of Memories awaiting activation in the sacred grove, a half-day's walk away. Nevim carries within his newly awakened druidic memory the knowledge of the required rituals. Alexander carries the resonance learned in the chamber outside of time, that frequency which, when fully inhabited, renders the separation between seeker and sought simply unreal. Helena carries the vision of the distant descendant she cannot yet fully share, but which guides every choice she makes before the choice has even been consciously articulated. And Excalibur, which is not merely a blade, but a consciousness. Not merely a weapon, but judgment made incarnate in metal, waits, not passively, with that specific activity of things that assess. What happened in Inverness proved something that no battle won could ever have proved, that those who will wield Excalibur know when not to wield it, know when the solution is not force, but understanding. Know that the world does not need more conquests, it needs more accords. And that wisdom, they will discover at the Fountain of Memories, was precisely what the sword had been waiting for its bearer to demonstrate.